Hello there, it's Juliana Michaels and welcome to my channel. Are you looking to add some autumn magic to your card making? In this video I'm diving into some fun fall themed techniques using Distress Sprays and the new Tim Holtz Sizzix Halloween release. You'll see how I created rich, colorful panels inspired by the changing fall leaves, perfect for die cutting with the Leaf Fragments Die Set. I'll also show you how to create a textured shimmery background using the Foliage Embossing Folder and a few simple inky tricks. Even if you don't have these exact dies, don't worry. You can absolutely use similar products you already have in your stash. It's all about the techniques, and there's lots of inspiration packed in here. Now let's get into it. In this video, I'm going to be working with the new Tim Holtz Sizzix Leaf Fragments Die Set. While new, it's not totally new. This was released several years ago, and Sizzix and Tim Holtz re-released it this year. It's just a great all-around set, perfect for fall themed projects for sure. And I'm also going to be working with the A5 3D embossing folder called Foliage. This is a new size of embossing folders that Tim Holtz has been releasing this year, and he is taking those smaller embossing folder sizes and re-releasing them in this new A5 size. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference in the sizes. And then I also am going to be using the Scribble and Splat die set from Tim Holtz and Sizzix. Now with any of these dies and the embossing folders, feel free to use similar type dies or embossing folders from your stash. And if you're not into the fall theme with this, you can certainly use these techniques for a variety of other themes. The paper I'm going to be working with primarily is the Distress watercolor cardstocks. I'll be using this for the die cutting and the background. And then a little bit of the embellishments die cuts. I'm going to be using some black craft stock, which is just craft paper printed with a black color on one side. And then as far as the mediums go, I've got ground espresso, distress ink, gathered twigs, distress oxide ink, and I'm going to be using some Sizzix luster wax in gold. And then I'm going to be using a combination of distress spray stain, distress oxide sprays, and distress spritz. So the spritz colors that I've got here are crackling campfire, walnut stain, and fossilized amber. The distress oxide colors I have are speckled egg, tumbled glass, milled lavender, rusty hinge, and walnut stain. And the spray stain colors I've got are scattered straw, wild honey, spiced marmalade, rusty hinge, fossilized amber, vintage photo, crackling campfire, fired brick, rustic wilderness, forest moss, shabby shutters, scorched timber, frayed burlap, and peeled paint. Now obviously if you don't have all of these sprays and all these colors, you certainly don't need all of them. You could probably get away with even just using one spray color for the techniques that we're going to be doing, and you're still going to get some cool effects by just combining the distress sprays with the oxides and the spritz. Here I'm going to just create some spray ink backgrounds to die cut the leaves from, and I just kind of want to make different panels, kind of slightly different colors that just kind of remind me of fall and the beautiful colors that you see during the fall when the leaves start changing. And I went through and just pulled out some different spray stains and oxides, and I've got some kind of orange leaning colors here with rusty hinge, spiced marmalade, crackling campfire, and fired brick, kind of go that reddish orange color. Got some yellows with fossilized amber, scattered straw, and wild honey. And then some greens with rustic wilderness, forest moss, shabby shutters, and peeled paint. And sometimes then to add a little bit of contrast with those, it's nice to throw in some kind of opposite colors. So if you think of the color wheel and kind of going opposite of red or green or orange, I've selected Rusty Hinge to kind of be an opposite with the greens. And then I've selected Milled Lavender to be an opposite with the yellows, and then the Tumbled Glass to be kind of an opposite with the oranges. Another option could be Speckled Egg. There's, I mean, lots of, you really kind of can't go wrong because we're gonna just be using those for some splatters, so it doesn't need to be, you know, any particular color necessarily. Another option you could do to add some little splatters would be like some walnut stain oxide spray. And then to add a little bit of shimmer, I've got some spritz in fossilized amber, crackling campfire, peeled paint, and walnut stain. So for the paper I'm going to be working with is the Distress watercolor cardstock, and I like to just cut a piece of it in half. I find that as like a nice size surface to work on for me. I don't know, when it gets bigger, I feel like it just gets a little harder to hold the paper, and I don't know, just this works best for me. Now I'm gonna be working here in my splat box, and I've just got some paper towels here in the bottom to help soak up the excess spray. And I'm just gonna place my panel down in here. And the other tool that you're gonna need is just a distress sprayer or some kind of water bottle, and then your heat tool, just to kind of help speed up the drying process. Before we get going too much, you just wanna remember to shake up the oxide inks before you use them, just to get that pigment and everything mixed in real good. And then yeah, so we're just gonna start off with the colors here. I usually like to start kind of with the lighter color first, and I'm just gonna spritz some color here and there. Not really rhyme or reason to it. Just get some color down, and I'll kind of darken it up here. So that was Shabby Shutters, the peeled paint, and then we're gonna do a little forest moss, which gets you real nice and dark. And then get a little rustic wilderness here to change it up a little bit more as well. And you can always go back in, like if you wanna lighten things up a little bit more with the Shabby Shutters. It's a nice blender one, I find. And then, of course, you can always add some water. Now, right here, I love all of this little speckly bits that you get. So that happens when you don't use any water. Once you start adding water or a lot of spray stain, those speckled bits kind of start the ink's going to blend. So if you want more solid color, like you're kind of getting through here, just add some more water to it. I'm going to add a little bit of water here and there, but not lots of it. So I'm just kind of slowly pulling the trigger a little bit here and there, just to get a little bit of ink flow. And then the ink that's pooling on the edges, I'm just going to kind of tap off there. You can see how this sort of a thing gets a little more challenging, like the bigger the piece of paper is. So, and then from here, just give this a little dry. And obviously, you can add more or less water. Just kind of a personal preference there. If you want the colors to blend a little bit more, that's where the water would also come into play. Getting some of that to blend around a little bit. And then of course you can kind of tilt it and blend it that way as well. And if there's any like sections where you're like, oh, I want some more, forest moss up in this corner here. And paper is going to start curling a little bit. That's normal because it's paper, but you can kind of add a little spritz there if you like. Maybe a little bit more down there. And blend that in a little bit with some water. And then just keep on drying. And it's just a matter of just having fun, playing with the sprays. when you go to spray, don't hesitate, just spray it and go with what you get. And as Tim always has said, take what you get and don't throw a fit. And you don't necessarily have to dry this like completely toasty dry. You can always kind of leave it as is. And now I'm just going to add some splatters here with, you know, I kind of feel like that just seems very, very bright. I think I want to add something to tone that down a little bit. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit of some frayed burlap here. Just kind of spritz and see what, there we go, yeah. So that's kind of toning it down a little bit. So it's a, you know, just a light, since it's a light brown, it's a good, perfect layer on there to tone that green down so it wasn't quite so bright. We're not going for summer leaves. I want some fall leaves. So we'll give that a dry. All right, and if you've got any little stubborn areas that aren't wanting to dry, taking longer than you want, you can always just kind of dab at them with your paper towel or rag or something there. So now I'm going to add some spritz using the Walnut Stain Distress Spritz. And again, with this spritz, because it's got the mica in there, you want to make sure you shake that up really, really well. And when you tilt it over, that there's no more of that pigment or anything sitting on the bottle. So shake that up very, very well. That will help minimize clogging because everything's mixed in. You're not sucking up chunks of mica into the spray mechanism. There you can see there's really nothing on the bottom of the bottle anymore because it's all mixed in. So now we can give that a spray. And with the spritz, it's designed to kind of give more of a real light misting in the little speckledy spritzes. So it's not going to give you a coverage of any kind, but it is going to add a little bit of shimmer, and you're going to get some of those little droplets and things. Then you can just wipe off the nozzle there, and then we'll give this another dry. So it's just it's going to add just a real tiny bit of shimmer over the entire panel that you'll be able to see much better once it's dry, because then the light can reflect off of that mica and start seeing it here as it's drying. So here you can kind of see a little bit of that shimmer. Now this larger droplets, these are going to take a lot longer to dry than you expect them to, even with using the heat tool. So just make sure you give them time, because until that's completely dry, you are going to be able to wipe this off and you'll get it on your finger, which I kind of stuck my finger in there just to see, and it was still a little bit wet. So you know, just keep drying that, or let it sit to the side and let it dry, whichever works best for you. And then now to finish this off, I think I'm going to add a little bit of some Rusty Hinge splatters with the oxide, and just going to mix that up again real good. Try to get as much of that mixed in as possible. And then I'm just going to open this up, and we're going to tap to get some splatters here. I don't want tons of them. And if you want some bigger ones, you can always tap it down and do some of that kind of a thing with it if you like. And then you can always give that a little mist, get those moving if you want. Get some blending. See what happens there. If you don't like that, take your paper towel and tap it off. You can always minimize some of that if you like. But so that, I love how that orange just kind of pops out, makes the green kind of pop a little bit, adds a little bit of a contrast to things. So as you can see, I mean, if you wanted this more like more browns, then maybe leave off the Rustic Wilderness. I felt like that maybe was a little bit too yellow of a green, kind of bright there. But for that Rusty Hinge, as you can see as it's drying, just kind of fades down. It's not bright, bold orange once it's dried. And it really just adds a nice touch to things. And I think one more step here, maybe add a little bit of some walnut stain splatters as well, using the oxide walnut stain. And I feel like I need some black, little black splatteries. Well, I am going to grab, I'll add some more splatters, but this time I'm going to do a little bit with the scorched timber here. So, oh yeah. And then we'll just give that a dry again, or you can just let it sit to the side, let it dry, but it's not going to be nearly as bright or bold in the color once it dries. So just kind of keep that in mind, especially since we're layering all these different sprays over each other. But really it's just keep going until you're, you know, happy with it. And if you add another layer and you're not happy with it, then you can either choose to, you know, move on, or you know, keep playing with it. So as you can see, I was just kind of experimenting here as well as I was creating this panel. The one that I originally made that I used on the card, I did not write down what colors I used, and yeah, you can see it's definitely more like a yellowy greens instead of the bright bold greens, but this is still really pretty. I'm guessing I did not use any of the forest or the rustic wilderness on this one, so probably did more with bundled sage, or no, I probably just did more with like the shabby shutters, peeled paint, forest moss, and then it looks like there's maybe some kind of a brown in here, so maybe I did some vintage photo or something in there with that. So yeah. But, and that gives me an idea. Let's try that. What if I spray over this panel with some vintage photo? Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so that just toned it down and made it a little darker. I'm wondering if I used some kind of brown, maybe gathered twigs or something, but that kind of tones it down even a little bit more. And if you want to add, like, you know, more water splatters, you can. You know, there's unlimited things that you can add to, like, just add interest in that to the background. So like if you were to give this a little spritz with the water, and you can kind of let that reactivate some of those inks and add a little more interest and depth to the design. And then, you know, let that dry, and you just keep going and going and going, and just, you know, have fun playing and creating the panels. I sometimes just kind of go and go and go way too much, but let you see the process here a little bit. It's kind of good to know, like, my thinking is, kind of gives you permission to play and just experiment, see what'll happen. But it also helps knowing the colors. I mean, I will say, you know, having swatches and knowing that, you know, vintage photo kind of goes a little more of a brown or redder brown, and like where I picked up and used the frayed burlap earlier, that was a lighter color. So, but yeah, so you can see as that's drying that those little water splatters just added some more interest and texture to the background. I am loving how this has turned out. So super happy with that. All right, so now let's go on to the next one. So at this point, like, if you want to flip your paper towel over, you can, so you don't accidentally get any green on things that you maybe don't want green on. And let's do the orange now. And get out all of our sprays here, and let's start off with a little spiced marmalade. Oh, forget how bright that is. Maybe brighter than I wanted, but we're there. Okay, maybe let's do some crackling campfire. Definitely getting more into that reddy orange. And let's do some rusty hinge. And I've also got some fired brick here, so get a little more red in there. Oh yeah, my. Okay, very red. All right, so from here we can start spritzing, getting those colors blending a little bit more. Kind of tap off some of that as you're going there. If you want, tilt it and blend it. All right, let's get that a little bit of a dry. Here you can see, like, that is crazy bright. A little brighter than I would like. So again, I think I'm going to take some of that frayed burlap and give that a little spritz over this, just to tone it down just a teeny bit. So I'm kind of going back from a distance here. And I also like how that just kind of gave it some speckles. Interest there. So the closer you spray the sprays, the more intense the color is going to get. If you hold it back, you're going to get a little bit more fine mist. Oh yeah, just that little bit of that frayed burlap over things really added a nice touch there. I'm loving that. All right, so now let's do some speckled egg. So we're gonna give that a good shake, because again, this is the oxide spray. We're gonna get bold, and I'm gonna just spritz from a distance. Ooh, there we go. And that light misting over everything really kind of tones things down a little bit. Now I'm gonna add some splatters here and there. Now, if you do this while the ink is wet, you're going to get a lot more like running and movement of the colors. So like as you can see down here where it's still kind of wet, those colors are going to move around a little bit, whereas when they're put onto the drier ink areas, they're just going to kind of stay where you put them. So just a little something you can play with as well. But if you want some bigger splatters, just get a little bit more ink on the end of it when you flick it down, and give that a dry. And again, now we're going to add some spritz, I think. Ooh, or maybe some scorched timber. So I don't want to get covered, so I'm going to go far back off the panel here and give that a little spritz. Ooh, yeah, that looks awesome. All right. That adds a cool touch of grungy goodness there to things. Next, final step here. Let's add a little bit of some shimmer. Again, this time using the spritz. So I've got the walnut stained spritz. Remember just to shake that up really good. And then I'm going to do a little bit of the crackling campfire spritz as well. So shake that up real good. Okay. I'll give that a little spritz here. And then we'll dry that, and it should be good to go, I think. The only thing I might do is add some water splatters here and there. So go ahead and kind of slowly pull that trigger. Let that kind of bigger water droplets form. And then, yeah, keep drying this. All right, so there is a look at the orange panel. And lastly, I do a yellow one. All right, and I'm not going to worry, since we're kind of in the same color family-ish, about switching that over. But yeah, so for this I've got wild honey, scattered straw, and fossilized amber. So kind of starting with the lighter color here. And that was a scattered straw. I'm going to do a little wild honey. And then we're going to add a little fossilized amber. And then we'll add some water here and kind of get these colors blend in a little bit more. And just tilt and let those colors flow and blend. There we go. And remember to dab off the sides if you want to kind of avoid those harsh lines along the edge. But because I'm going to be using this for die cutting, it's not necessarily as big of a deal if those form there. But let's give that a dry here. I'm going to use that frayed burlap again. I feel like that's just really been a good, nice layer. Just kind of lightly mist over. I'm kind of holding it from a distance and over the top of it. So if you hold it at an angle, the sprays are going to kind of go in that angle. I kind of made that mistake on the kind of orange panel, but all is good. Now I'm going to get crazy and add some milled lavender. I know, seems a little crazy, but let's see what happens. So shake that up really good. You know what? Let's just start with the splatters. Like using the nozzle, see what we get. See if we like how that's looking. Yeah, that's kind of funky. All right, so let's dry that. See where we end up with the colors drying. Such a light color, I think it's gonna fade down into kind of a gray color. Yeah, that's what's happening, which is not bad. But any kind of opposite the color wheel, so like kind of purpley or blue are always, purple is technically the opposite of yellow, but you could kind of go with a blue-purple color as well. But the lighter ones and the oxides are going to give you that kind of cool chalky effect with them. So yeah, I think I'm going to get brave and just do a light mist from a distance. There we go. All right. Now let's do some of that scorched timber. So again, I'm kind of coming up from the top here and just squirting, just barely squirting down, get those kind of splatter effects there. Which, let's see what happens as that dries. It might have been a little bit too dark. That probably would have been a little prettier with maybe walnut stain versus the scorched timber, but it's all good. Kind of going with what I had out here, so. But yeah, like a warmer brown would have been prettier, I think. So like let's just do a little section here with the vintage photo. You can see how that kind of warms it up a little bit again. So, not bad. Kind of going less yellow, but that's okay. If you wanted to get a little bit more yellow back into it, you could probably spritz a little bit of like maybe scattered straw over it a little bit if you wanted. So there you go. Get that back into the yellows. And then I'm going to finish this off once it's dry. All right, and then if you want to add some water splatters to this, you can. It just adds a little more texture and interest. Certainly stop at any point during any of this process. I just want to encourage you to play and have fun. Explore what happens when you do this or that. See what happens. So now I'm going to add some splatters with the Distress Sprays fossilized amber. So just kind of hold that up over and let it spritz-a-roo. There. And let's give that a dry and call this done. So here is a look at the 3 panels we just made. So we've got our kind of green one there, orange one, and a yellow one. Yeah, so you can see on this one where when I was holding the spray, I was coming at it from this angle instead of being up overhead. So the splatters are kind of a little elongated. This one has a lot less splatters, and then this one has more too as well. So again, play, have fun, and yeah, enjoy the process. And then now that these are finished, then what I'm going to do is just take the leaf dies from the Leaf Fragments Die Set and die cut out some leaves. If you don't have this leaf set, any leaf die would work, and just have fun making some fall leaves to use for this project or any project. Another wonderful thing about die cutting from panels like this is you can kind of place that die, like if there's a section on here that you like better, you can put the die in that area and kind of cut out that area. For the background on this card, we're going to be using the Foliage Embossing Folders. This is the A5 size, which is the new one that just was released. And then there's also the original, which is more of a standard, smaller card size. You can use either one, so if you only have the small one, don't feel like you need to go out and get this larger one. The larger one works great for bigger projects like journal covers and, gift boxes and decorating like gift bags and things like that. You can use these larger panels, scrapbooking. But for cards, if you're wanting to do like a smaller card size, you could, create a panel with this and then cut it in half. And if you want to learn more about these folders, I'll have a link in the description box and here where you can watch another video where I talk about some ways to use these larger embossing folders. Before we get on to that, I'm going to spray the background paper here. This is a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to just spray it with some antique linen distress oxide spray. I'll give that a good shake, get all that pigment mixed in, and then I'm just going to spray that over the background here and there. Get a little sticky there. Might need to give my spray a little clean out. Getting stuck down in there a little bit. All right, so now give that some spritzing with water, get that ink moving. You can also spray the panel before you add the ink. If you want to add a little bit more, you can, especially now that that water's on there. Ooh, sticking. There we go. And give that a dry. And I don't know why, but sometimes you get this really cool kind of rusty orange color from this spray. And I think it's just some of the pigments that are in there that make it the color that it is. But they really come out when you spray them and then add that water. I don't know if adding a little bit more here would get me some of them or not, but we'll just see what happens. Oh yeah. Ooh, there we go. Oh yeah. Let's tap some of that down in here. So yeah, I think if you get it a little bit more concentrated and then add some water, get that ink flowing, then that will get you more of that kind of rusty color there. So I'm gonna add a little more water here and there, and then keep drying. As you can see, there's just these like oranges and blue, grays in there, and yellow. It's such a fun, funky color. So now we're going to emboss this paper using whichever embossing folder you want to use, doesn't matter which side. And I'm going to just spritz the back side of this so we're not reactivating any of that ink. So just give that a spritz with your water bottle. That'll just kind of help soften the fibers in the paper and make it emboss a little bit easier. And then place that in the folder and then run that through your machine. And Sizzix does now make a larger cutting plate that's made for using with these larger embossing folders. And so here's a look at the embossed paper now. And the next thing you're going to do is take your Distress Oxide ink pad. This is Gathered Twigs. And your paper's kind of rolled up a little bit from all of the spray and ink and everything. Just kind of flatten it out a little bit. And then you can take the ink pad and then you're just going to rub that over the surface. So you're just going to very lightly rub this over. You don't need to push down at all. Very lightly. That's just going to bring out that design a little bit more. And then from here, you're just going to give that a few spritzes with some water. So we're just going to kind of activate that oxide ink on there a little bit more. And then you can set this to the side and let that dry, or use your heat tool to dry it. So once that's dry, the next thing we're going to do is add a little shimmer and shine using the Sizzix Luster Wax. This is the gold one. And just kind of scoop a little bit of that onto your finger. I do recommend wearing gloves with this medium. It's just, I'm not sure. It tends to have a little bit of a, well, because it dries permanently, I guess I'm just leery of using that on my skin. So again, you're just going to kind of hold that paper down flat with your other hand and get it onto your finger. I like to rub it around in the lid to kind of smooth it out. If there's any big clumps, I'll kind of wipe them back off into the jar. You can also rub it around on your craft mat as well. And then you're going to just very lightly rub this over the surface of your background. So I'm not going for complete coverage of anything, but just kind of highlighting some of the areas. So if you want to rub it around on your craft mat, you can do it like that as well. And it just adds a little bit of shimmer to the background. And then, if you accidentally get a little bit more on an area than you want, if you want to, even that out, just, add a little bit larger area somewhere else that looks a little bit more intentional with the heavier hand. There we are. Okay, and then as far as cleaning this up, once it's dried on the paper, it's going to be permanent. So right now, you could probably still wipe some of it off onto your finger. So just let this set to the side and let it dry. As far as like non-porous surfaces, so like your craft mat, I've found that will clean off pretty easily with just a little bit of some rubbing alcohol. Even if it gets dried on there, it'll still come off because it can't absorb into it. That said, I still kind of recommend cleaning up afterwards. And like if you're working on a glass mat, definitely don't need to worry about being able to clean it off of that either. All right, so then the final step here, I took the paper and I just trimmed it down to the size I wanted for my card background. So I'm doing a little bit larger than normal card here. This is cut down to 4 1/4 by 6 inches. And then I'm gonna add a matte layer that is 4 1/2 by 6 1/4 inches. But before I do that, I'm going to take some of the Ground Espresso Distress ink and a little blending tool here and just kind of ink around the edges. So I'm using this because I want to kind of pull some of that ink a little bit farther into the background. I'm just kind of working my way around here. And to get those edges a little bit darker, I'm going to take this foam blending tool and rub it around the edges. So that'll just darken it up just a little bit more. So, different tools for different things. So there we are. Now, you could also do this around the edges as well if you wanted, if you didn't want to use or don't have that kind of a blending brush, you could use the foam blender. Either one will work. And then from here, if you want to add a little bit more splatters, you can. Sometimes I like to go in and just splatter around where I added some of the distress ink along the edges because it really gets a really cool kind of vintage grungy effect there. And when the water's reacting with that ink, and then just give that a dry. And so there is a look at the finished background. And like, if that's just too white for you, just take your blending brush and kind of blend back over it again. That will tone that down a little bit, but still allow you to see that interest you created with the splatters. So that's a little something I like to do sometimes. For the rest of the embellishments, go back to those leaves and you can take your ground espresso and just kind of ink the edges of those a little bit. I like to do that just to kind of get rid of those white edges. It's not really gonna, it'll layer up a little bit over all the sprays that we've done and kind of give you a little more brown finish to them. For the other embellishments on the card, I also used the Scribbles and Splat die set from Tim Holtz and just cut some of these circular scribble pieces from some black craft stock. I stamped the sentiment here onto a piece of white cardstock and die cut that using a label die. The stamp set I used is the Simple Sayings stamp set. And then I used the label here from this Labels die set. And then for just a little bit of added interest, I also added in some of this gold thread. So I just took a length of it and kind of spiraled it around and then just adhered it under the various pieces to help attach it. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I used Distress Sprays to create those rich fall-inspired leaf die cuts, and how easy it is to add subtle shimmer with the Foliage Embossing Folder. These techniques are a great way to stretch your supplies, whether you're using the new release or something already in your stash. You'll find links to all of the products I used in the description box below, along with the visual supply list if you want a quick look at everything. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe for more crafty inspiration, tips, and techniques. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay crafty, my friend.